Welcome to Khanversations. I'm Muqtedar Khan, your host, and today we have with us a very good friend and a distinguished scholar of international relations and India's foreign policy from New Delhi, Dr. Bharti Chhibber. She is a professor at the University of Delhi. She's not just a professor, but she's also a public intellectual who is well known for her analysis, has participated in various projects for promoting democracy in the region. She is also interested in the impact of the environment and the intersection of environment and international relations. Most recently, she was invited by the State Department to become a participant in the study of US institutes. You can see here this article that was published in the Span, which summarizes her visit to the US. And that wonderful photograph that you are seeing is her photograph with one of the most prominent senators in the US, Senator Chris Coons, who's from Delaware. Chris Coons is also a member of the US Senate Foreign Relations Committee. That makes him a very powerful voice when it comes to US foreign policy, and especially US investments, etc., in the global South and in Africa. So Bharti Chhibber has a long history of having an impact both in India as well as internationally. So we are absolutely delighted to have her on the show. Dr. Bharti Chhibber, welcome to Khanversations.
Namaste, good morning. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to all. And thank you, Professor Khan, for inviting me. It's always such a pleasure to be back to your program.
Thank you very much, Bharti. And this is your second show on Khanversations. So, in the beginning of the year, I had done a show on Khanversations where I had argued that this year was going to be both a taste and test of India's global leadership, because India was going to be the chair and president of the G20. India was going to be the chair of the SCO, and India had just finished its 2-year stint in the UN Security Council, which ended with this huge conference that Dr. Jaishankar organized to basically bring about reform in multilateral governance worldwide. So at that time, I had argued that this is a test for India to show its global leadership quality, to set the global agenda, and also a taste of what it means to be a major power. So now the year is nearly over, and we are into the last week and holiday sessions. So how do you see, Dr. Chhibber, Bharti, how do you see how India's year turned out to be? How did India perform as a global leader, as president of G20, and otherwise?
Thank you, Professor Khan, for that excellent question. Since we are reviewing the Indian foreign policy or diplomacy towards the end of the year, but I would say that it has turned out very, very well. India has done exceptionally well in the ongoing year, which will be ending soon. Let us talk about India at the global level. We have been talking about India as a regional power. We have even talking about Asian century. We have even been talking about India as the voice of the global South, which I completely agree. But at the same time, this year, India was seen at the global platform, at the global stage. We had Voice of the Global South Summit at the inception of the year, very successful, had about 127 members across the continents. And then, of course, G20, which is the highlight of the year, where India brought together countries, very competing countries from different geopolitical perspectives, US, Russia, representative from China and other. And the highlight of the summit, in addition to, of course, the New Delhi Declaration, in which everyone agreed to a kind of an understanding how to proceed with the contentious issue of Russia-Ukraine war. But in addition to that, the kind of infrastructure issues or the kind of biofuel alliance that has been spoken about, or India, Middle East, Europe corridor. I think these all highlighted that India can bring together different powers of the world together at the same platform and bring about certain kind of consensus among them and play a role as a leader. In addition to that, Dr. Khan, another couple of things that happened during the previous academic or the ongoing year is something that is soft power. Now, when we talk about soft power, then something which has not got the due attention is how India was recognized as the global platform in terms of our movies, winning Oscars, We had Elephant Whisperers. We also had the Natu Natu song. In addition to that, let us talk about Chandrayaan 3. Well, of course, we had a lot of conversation on Chandrayaan 3, putting India at the global map on the elite club. But then how about Aditya, That also talks about from lunar space to the solar space. So India has a couple of interesting international recognitions. And how can we forget about the International Yoga Day? So this is something which, again, not only Prime Minister Modi was there in the UN, but it actually came in the Guinness Book of the World Records, where we have people from different nationalities coming together at the same platform. And finally, although there are so many other achievements, but of course, I'll also be talking about India-US relations. The visit of Prime Minister Modi to US, and of course, visit of President Joe Biden to India as part of G20 summit. This actually, I would say, brought about a different course, in international relations, both bilaterally and multilaterally. Well, bilaterally, we have never seen India and US so together. There were a lot of convergences. Of course, there are certain differences, but there were a lot of convergences. In addition to, of course, in the Indo-Pacific or China's aggressive postures, which brought them together. They also came together on different platforms, whether it was transfer of technology, whether it was working together in STEM, whether it's digital technology, anti-terrorism. So this actually highlighted that how India and US, which have been in good relations for quite some time, but actually, in true sense of the word, strategic partnership that we are talking about, beyond multilateralism, beyond Quad, or beyond other organizations, bilaterally they have come together very close to a mutual understanding, of course, in spite of certain differences. So I would say that there's so many other things, but I would say that this year has been very good for India diplomatically, both strategically, militarily, in terms of defense cooperation, in terms of balancing the two different competing worlds, when we talk about US on one hand, Russia on the other, for that matter, even the Middle East, how India is balancing Arab world and Israel in the present Israel and Hamas war. So I think strategically also this year has been excellent for India, putting it on the global map. And of course, India has come again as a soft power, as a leader in the soft power, as a voice of the global south too.
Bharti, you brought up the U.S.-India relations as something one of the progress as something critical for this year, and for the last 2 years we have been hearing not only President Biden but also various leaders in the U.S. This has become like a mantra of American foreign policy, which says that India-US partnership, India-US relationship is the most consequential relationship of this century. So they say that the next, what's left, 76 years, 77 years, this is the most important relationship. But India has an advantage over the US in the sense that India has a huge diaspora in the US, about 50 lakhs, 5 million people, and they are doing phenomenally well. They are probably a model minority. A congressman remarked saying that Indian Americans constitute 1% of the population, but they pay 6% of the income tax of the country. And you can see in the Republican primaries now with Vivek Ramaswamy, Nikki Haley, how prominent Indian American voices are in the US. And of course, the vice president of the US, Kamala Harris. So what this does is it helps the broader American public develop a positive image of India. But there aren't thousands of Americans living in India, for that matter, right? We have only one Mr. Garcetti who goes around drinking chai and filter coffee in Madras or in Chennai and then goes other places. So the reason I'm going into this detail to show is that one of the barriers to improving US India relations was mistrust of the other, right? But the Indian diaspora is helping America overcome its distrust of India. But the distrust of America, especially among the Indian elite, uh, is that something that is gone or is it still there? So, for example, very prominent Indians, whether they're rich or politically powerful, will be happy to send their kids to the US for college or even to settle down here. But when it comes to policy with the US, they will not trust the US. So there is this historical distrust. I see lots of people coming and commenting on my show where they talk about how we can't trust America because of what it did in 1971. So in the last 1 year, do you think that Prime Minister Modi's visit to India, Biden's to US, Biden's visit to India, has this helped in reducing that?
Absolutely, Professor Khan. I would say that yes, the kind of issues or divergences India and the US had, as you correctly mentioned, historically, it took some time for both the countries to come together. They have come together, but there's much more to be achieved. And that mistrust, as you're talking about, uh, well, I would say that the the trusting factor is much more than the mistrust. The convergences or the issues that they both face together are much more important, and that trust. It is building. It is building. It is slowly. It is building, and diaspora, of course, is playing a very important role, whether it's business to business, or whether it's people to people. For example, take the recent issues about the whole issue between India and the US in terms of the dialogue between whether you call freedom of speech or from India's perspective, you call it a designated terrorist. So I would say that freedom of speech is something which is very critical, but at the same time, it's also important that a country which has suffered from terrorism for a very long time, for decades, like India, its concerns, it should be more understood. And I would say US, which itself has faced 9/11 and also the war on terror, I think it's in a position to understand that. Because if someone incite violence, it would further result in violence. We have the latest incident in California as an example of that. So somewhere down the line, in order to build that trust, as you're talking about, it's very important that both the countries, in addition to cooperation in diverse fields, whether it's military, strategic, or trade for that matter, the common areas of perception and understanding, that is something that also needs to be built upon. Well, India and US are already working together in terms of anti-terrorist or information sharing, but here the criticality issue, which India has also expressed multiple times, is about the whole idea of violence, for example gun violence, and if I remember, which America also suffers from. So I think America is in a position to understand it, perhaps a more understanding of the perception of each other's security point of view will be more helpful. And if I can recall it, then I think Hillary Clinton also once said, that if you develop a snake in your backyard, it's going to bite you one day. So I think it's very critical that the two countries, they come together on the same platform when where it considers issue of security, which is vital for both the countries, US and India, since both have suffered these kind of issues not long ago, even suffering at present. For example, India is still facing the terrorism in India.
I was a few years ago, I had a doctor who was fatter than me. And every time I visited the doctor, he would lecture me on my weight. And I would keep thinking, yeah, look at yourself first in the mirror. And all the solutions that you are offering me to lose weight, how come they're not working on you? And now, of course, the US culture has changed a bit. We think of obesity as a disease, etc., and we don't really comment. Even the doctors are very careful. But the US is like that. The US has suddenly now become obese. Uh, but the US has not lost the habit of lecturing others on on health, etc. So whether it's about democracy promotion, the US is not a democracy anymore. We are a struggling democracy. We lecture people on weapons and we sell weapons to everybody all over the world. So the US is rapidly in the past few years lost some of its, shall we say, this this idea that we are better than others and so we can lecture others. I think the US needs to get over that. It needs to first fix itself at home. If you remember, in the first 2 years, Biden kept talking about how we need to strengthen our democracy. We need to strengthen our democracy. Now he doesn't even talk about that, even though the US has gone down a couple of notches since he became president. So I think that the rest of the world should pay less and less attention to American lectures on whether it is democracy or freedom of speech. Here we are going after college kids, etc., and after professors for their statements, which the government does not like. So even though the US-India relations are quite critical, not just for India and the US, but also for the rest of the world, the other critical relationship is India-China relationship. So I want to talk about the other global forum that India was president of, which is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the SCO. And so in the beginning of the year, we thought, oh, wow, India has a foot in both. G20 is like, because of the presence and domination of G7, it is essentially a Western dominated global forum, but SCO is a West free, as they would say, West Mukt forum. That is the only major forum along with BRICS where there are no Western countries. So how do you see what happened with SCO, India downgrading it to just a virtual meeting? Was that because Xi Jinping would not come to India or India didn't want him to come? It came as a big surprise to a lot of us that suddenly an opportunity for India to be also a leader of a non-Western forum was kind of abandoned in favor of, by making it a virtual few-hour event, it completely downgraded the opportunity. How do you see that, Bharti?
Well, I think I would also see it as a very positive development and a very smart development at the same time. Because not only China, we would not have been expecting any senior leader from Russia also. We were not expecting Putin either. So that is one. And secondly, as you correctly mentioned, that India has moved beyond South Asia. India, I would say, has also moved beyond, SCO, although SCO is a very important thing and India is an important member, but India is working now at a more global stage. So I think it was a very smart move on the part of India to have a virtual summit. It did its job very well. As the leader, as the presidency was with India. At the same time, if you have seen the declarations, then India very cleverly also did not recognize the BRI, which was there as part of the SCO commitment. It said that it did not agree with it, that BRI actually plays a very important role because it said that there has to be transparency when you talk about communication or infrastructure investments. And at the same time, Iran entered as a member of SCO during that summit. And India also was part of this debate on de-dollarization. Now, that's another very interesting element. This is why I'm saying that one of the biggest achievements of India in the last year is balancing. Well, India-China relations, they are not at the top of the where it should be. We all know that. But at the same time, India is meeting China and BRICS and SCO. But it is balancing other important global powers, including US, which we just spoke about. At the same time, it is also talking about de-dollarization, so that there is what we move beyond what we call Bretton Woods system. Although Bretton Woods system collapsed a long time back, but still that monopoly of dollar. So this whole debate, although we can say de-dollarization is not going to fructify very soon, but at least there is a debate on that. In many countries, including India, Russia, even China, many of these countries with many other countries, they are trading in their own local currency. So yes, SEO has its own importance, and I think it worked out very well, as perhaps India wanted it to be in this year, because it has other important things. It happened just after Prime Minister Modi's US visit. So that means the whole importance or the whole idea of that time was India-US relation, but still is. And as I said, there may be some differences between India and US. They are still very, very solid, in spite of the recent issues between the two countries. And you also mentioned about the ambassador of US to India. I'd like to share he's doing very well in terms of having good public relations in India and also improving India-US relations. Excellent job on his part in the initial months of his coming to India.
You
So
know
I would
that
say that, yeah.
he's an ABD. Garcetti is an
Mhm,
ABD in comparative politics. He didn't finish his
mhm,
PhD, and apparently his research interest was South Asia. It is very
mhm,
strange for a Latin American American person focusing on South Asia. I want to talk a
mhm,
little bit about this de-dollarization that you mentioned in the context
mhm,
of SEO. It's
mhm,
not been very successful. I mean, China has
mhm,
like 4 or 5% of international trade, and
mhm,
Saudis are also talking
mhm,
along with China, India, Russia. Russia has incentives to avoid sanctions. Uh,
mhm,
the only people who have actually been successful to some extent are the Europeans. And so, if you look at reserve currencies, you'll see it's the dollar followed by
mhm,
the euro. But rest of the global currencies have not even reached, I think, 10% combined. And India has absolutely, there is not much trade at
mhm,
all.
mhm,
So the US is ignoring it because it's not
mhm.
really a threat. But if de-dollarization begins to reach a proportion where it threatens US economic dominance, then what happens to India-US relations if the US now sees India as undermining US hegemony through de-dollarization? So what happens to this strategic partnership?
Well, Professor Khan, I think it's a very far-fetched kind of a dream to have de-dollarization. Dollar is still very, very strong. And as you correctly mentioned, the other currencies are nowhere it. So I don't know when it's going to happen. And if it is going to happen, I don't see it happening anywhere in the near future. But at the same time, Dr. Khan, I would say that India and US, they have their elections next year. Um, just let the elections be over and you'll see that already the strong relations between India and US, they are going to be more in depth. And as we're talking about the latest issue of
Are you hinting?
terrorism,
Are you hinting that Trump might win?
I'm hinting that India and US are going to have a very strong relation and there'll be a lot of continuity, trust me. Well, from India's point of view, we know that there will be a lot of continuity. We already know the results of the upcoming elections in India. Although, of course, we have a strong democracy and strong, other parties also there. But at the same time, I would say that there will be a lot of continuity and the countries or the leaders, in addition to their, of course, global responsibilities, they're also concentrating on the elections right now. So once the elections are over in the next year, there'll be much more in-depth cooperation between the two. And trust me, issues like de-dollarization doesn't even figure in India-US bilateral, multilateral relations. What I see now and see in future coming, that there may be certain divergence. We do have divergence even now, but these will not come into the relations between the two. The so solidified relations are building because, as you also use the word, both need each other. They both need each other bilaterally, but also more so multilaterally in terms of the global agenda. China is, of course, one factor, but it's not the only factor. There's so many other factors. We have Russia, we have Middle East, and of course, we do have South Asia also. So India needs US, but US also needs India. Rather, I would say in the present times, US needs India more in terms of whether we call it economic powerhouse or in terms of China, because we share borders with China. So India needs US at the same time for technology and otherwise, but at the same time, US also needs India, and the diaspora is also a strength, that India has in US and Indo-Pacific. And when we talk about Indo-Pacific, Dr. Khan, we usually talk about the strategic dimension, China, in terms of free movement of trade or commercial vehicles. But let us talk about climate change also. Let us also talk about security of the maritime boundaries. Take this latest incident that happened today itself, where we had the as a fallout of the Hamas-Israel war, how the ships, the commercial ships, have been attacked by the drone, and how India responded very quickly, and we had our INS and we had the people, the Navy people actually escorting the vehicle back, or the, cargo ship back, So this actually highlights the strength of India in terms of maritime boundaries, which were rejected in till the Mumbai attack that we face. Now, India is rising not only economically, but as a strategic power, as a military power also. Of course, they have been like, we're working together in terms of defense. Earlier, we were working with Russia. Now we have diversified, and US and of course, Israel have become our primary partners. But all these actually highlight that India is a rising, not only, as I said, Asian country, but a global country. Self-reliance, that's another important point, Dr. Khan, I would like to highlight. As part of the US-India cooperation in June, July, this transfer of technology also in defense, US and India are cooperating. But take the example of the Hindustan Aeronautics Limited. They are the biggest factory of choppers manufacturing in Karnataka, India. So India is rising as a technological power in itself. Self-reliance, the mantra of the present government, or indigenization.
Well, it needs to be
So
debated
India
in
is a power to match. Yeah,
the
in future. Watch
self-reliance.
out.
The self-reliance part. I mean, there's a lot of talk about self-reliance,
Mhm.
and for the last 1.5 years, India has been talking about, say, for example, exporting Tejas, and nobody has bought it yet. And there was lots of talks about Argentina going forward, but Argentina has decided to buy used F-16s instead of buying new Tejas. Plus, the India is buying weapons from everybody, buying submarines from Italy and Germany,
Mhm.
buying weapons from the US, drones from the US, etc. So it kind of contradicts the narrative of self-reliance, Atmanirbhar Bharat, and so much of high-tech stuff is being imported. But I want to talk about you bringing up the environmental issue. One of the initial surprises that I got was when India announced that the G20 summit will be in September and not, usually it is in November, and that's when the presidency ends. And I tried to find out, and there were just a couple of articles published in India, I think in the Indian Express, which made the point that the reason why it was is because of pollution in Delhi in November. So the high degree of pollution. So one of the things that people keep talking about is that India is suffering from high degrees of pollution. And with all the talk about combating climate change, how is that going? I mean, for some people, it is like a major, shall we say, a domestic security issue, right? Dealing with climate change. Last year, Pakistan had these huge floods, which completely devastated one-third of the country's population was impacted by it. So I mean, you live in Delhi, how is the pollution, and how are we dealing with that?
Well, Dr. Khan, I'll start with the comment that you made regarding the previous question on the uh, indigenization or the defense cooperation. Yes, that is the whole point. India has been importing very long from Russia. Now we have started diversifying Israel and, of course, the US. Uh, but this is not only import in terms of weapons, it's more about technology. That was the highlight of the Prime Minister Modi's US visit in terms of cooperation. So with the technology, now we are moving towards manufacturing it together, import to manufacturing it together, and then the indigenization, or self-reliance, so that is how it's working. And also the COVID highlighted that we need to have the resilient supply chains, so that is another critical point, which binds India and US together, vis-a-vis China. And India is not only importing, just to share a couple of things, For example, we actually presented missile system to Vietnam some time back. So India is also gifting or sharing its expertise or weapons for that matter with other countries also. And in fact, it is rising as an exporter of the defense in the field of defense to many other smaller countries. And coming to your very critical question of climate change, well, Dr. Khan, I would say that this is something that I've been talking about and vocal about for decades now. That issue of climate change or sustainable development should be an election issue. And not only in India, across the world. Well, I haven't come across even a single country where climate change, pollution, deforestation has been part of a critical part of elections. We have other issues, but even the women issues, gender issues, of course political issues of unemployment, poverty, not only in India but across the world, even in the States, US, the recent election, all these issues are there, but never an issue of climate change or issue of sustainable development has caught the imagination of the people. And I actually wonder why. Perhaps people are not that aware that what climate change is doing to all of us. People perhaps are not aware that it's not confined to one country. It has global consequences. If it happens in Canada, repercussions are in US. It happens in Pakistan, repercussions are in India. If it happens in Indonesia, repercussions are on Philippines. So it is something which has a global connotation. And India also suffers from this. And as you correctly mentioned about the air pollution, we have been suffering from this. And the measures, now the countries are taking, or that India as a country is taking measures. We already had Environmental Protection Act way back in 1980s. Again, it has been modified. There have been many amendments. Latest technology, that is something that we are talking about in terms of dealing with Delhi's pollution. At the same time, cooperation between the center and the state. So a lot of issues are at helm of the affairs in terms of dealing with climate change. But yes, India is rising as a solar power. The International Solar Alliance, India took the lead in that. We in Haryana, we have its headquarters. India is working towards net zero, phasing down of fossil fuels are a couple of other issues that India is working on. And 2028, India has offered to have the next climate cooperation parties meeting in India, So India is taking lead, when it comes to solar energy or renewable energy or clean energy or green energy, as we talk about. And also, Dr. Khan, you'll be happy to know. I would say it's not that it's going to happen very soon, but yes, India is taking a lot of steps. Now, India is into startups and is rising as a startup country. And one of the areas where you have these startups is clean energy or renewable energy or making energy from waste. And also, it is giving jobs or empowering the youth, And we have many college students working in this area. We have other senior people and the professionals working in this area. CSR is being devoted in this area, in addition to, of course, various NGOs and, of course, the government. So I would say many stakeholders, they are working in this area. Of course, much more needs to be done. And this is another critical area where India and US should cooperate much more. They are, as part of International Solar Alliance. But you take the example of Gujarat and you take the example of Rajasthan. We have these huge solar panels, the solar parks that we have, and many more will be coming up. So I think this is another critical area where both US and India can cooperate. One, US is the technology, the green technology or the clean technology, and India has that human resource. So if they come together, then I'm sure, and cooperate much more in terms of dealing with climate change, of course, keeping their national interest, which is of the prime importance, then definitely I would say it will be beneficial not only for India and US, but for many other countries in the world.
So I think, Dr. Bharti, thank you very much for your very interesting analysis, and also especially for bringing up the climate issue. I'm not an expert on climate issues. I don't talk much about it, but in many places, many think tanks do see that along with pandemics, the climate challenge is the most important security challenge for all countries, and I also look forward to talking to you again in 2024 about India's foreign policy. I think that once the elections are over, we will see some more further development, especially on the issue of India's competition with China for leadership in the global South. We didn't talk much about China in this discussion, but we have already exceeded the time that I usually allocate for conversations. But thank you very much. And for all of you who have been watching, thank you very much for watching. If you have not already subscribed to Khanversations, please subscribe to Khanversations. Like this video, press the bell icon, do share this video with others in your socio-political network. Thank you very much, Bharti, for joining Khanversations.
Thank you. Namaste. It's always a pleasure to be on your program, Professor Khan. Thank you.
Happy holidays to everybody. And I will talk to
Yes.
people, but wishing you all also a happy new year.